Drivers, start your engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him, but he talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver, pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger, no sweating working for the man, alright.
Good evening, race fans. Welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to the Drafting the Circus program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about this past week in racing and preview next week. Joining me in the studio, I have Mr. Joey Barnes, Mr. Luis Torres, and last but not least, my good friend Richard Youden.
Hey, how's it going?
Hola.
Hola.
Yo.
Yo. So let's talk about Formula One back in the United States on a new venue. I mean, Formula One has had, we discussed the other week, it's been in a number of different venues. Miami, this is a new one. We had a very interesting looking race course that, from a distance, look almost like a little train set, with little fake water and little fake boats and everything. But, we did get the race in. It had a huge event status. And there were some European fans who felt it was a little too garish and a little too much event status and a little too showy. But heck, that's how we like stuff in America. Watch the Super Bowl sometimes, see all the pomp and circumstance at the Super Bowl, So, but at the end of the day, it was Max Verstappen, wrecking the Ferrari 1-2 front row party. And Verstappen kind of cutting a little bit into Leclerc's points lead, but Leclerc's still pretty healthily out front. I believe he's about 15 points ahead. So, Richard, let's talk about Miami.
Well, the Grand Prix of Miami. There was a social gathering and a race broke out in the background. It was pretty incredible to see all the A-list celebrities there and all the great and good of the like. But at the end of the day, it's exposure, and I think it was the largest. The viewing figures for it were over in the US over 2 million, which is unheard of for a live Formula One race. I know it's normally under 1 million, I believe. So great viewing figures there, which is the name of the game when Liberty Media want to try and crack the US. They want to get the exposure to it. All the teams really bought onto it with some instances, special liveries. The drivers had special helmets, special merchandise if you could afford it.
If you could afford it, yeah. I have at least one friend that went down to the race this weekend, and I will a little later tell you some of his impressions on merchandise and food and stuff. But the one odd comment he made was that Formula One exhaust smells like bong water, and I'm okay. I know that's what I said. All right, so I'm
I'm not going to ask.
I don't know. I don't know what bong water smells like.
No,
I'm not marijuana, but that was of all his comments. That's the one that just kind of stuck with me. I'm like, really? Okay. But
it is Florida.
Back to it later.
Yeah. Let's let that one marinate a little bit. And let's talk about the race.
What Joey said. It is Florida. Florida is Florida. There's nothing to it.
Exactly.
Like
this
nice weather.
This is true. Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah. I mean, it was. You mentioned there, Frank, about the whole setup. Or looked like almost like a model train set, which I can see that. Yeah. It was, but fundamentally the track, I think it was a pretty good track. You'd have thought, God, they would have learned after Singapore that you don't put those stupid little sausage curb chicanes in there because they really don't serve a purpose. And here they are again. I think that'll go for next year. And the nice thing about these tracks like this is, making changes to them isn't particularly hard because all you have to do is move a concrete barrier. Pretty much, it's more to it than that, I know, but fundamentally it's not a huge change, and it's not like a real street course where you'd have to demolish a house or fill in a harbour like they have in Monaco, and it's not like a normal road course where you've got trees and all that sort of stuff to have to worry about. So I think they can tweak the track a little bit and refine it, and I think we'll get pretty close to being something that's really, really competitive and entertaining. A couple of issues with the track surface, but nothing too much. I mean, it was interesting reading some of the comments. One of the big issues with the track surface being different from what they normally use was actually a lot of the Florida Department of Transportation regulations for how they could build the road, and the materials all had to be locally sourced and all this sort of stuff. So they couldn't ship in the asphalt from other countries like they do, in Saudi Arabia and some of these other new tracks we've been to. So that was kind of interesting, but on the whole, I thought it was a decent track. Still room for improvement, but and fundamentally there's some pretty good racing. Throughout the weekend. The Ferraris obviously had the better in qualifying. Max had I don't know whether it was a mistake per se or just didn't have the speed in the car during qualifying, but as we saw in Imola a couple of weeks ago, Max's race pace is pretty stout, and that straight line speed that the Honda engine has. I mean, who would have thought we would have said that? Honda engine, which I know it's not badged as a Honda anymore, but it fundamentally is. The Honda engine has the best straight line speed on the grid. Especially with combine it with that slippery Red Bull aero package and Max's ability to drive a car on the edge. I thought he had a really, really impressive performance, as I say, similar to Imola. And if he keeps this up through the next 3 or 4 races, he'll certainly catch Charles Leclerc pretty quickly, because it didn't really look like they had much on paper for him during the race. There was the potential of a safety car scenario that could have put the ball back into the Ferrari hands, but unfortunately Ferrari didn't have any fresh medium or soft tyres to run on those last 10-15 laps or so post safety car, and so that really sort of scuppered the Ferrari's chances. Perez did have that option at the end there. He was sitting in 4th to come in and pit and put some fresh tyres on, but I think he had an engine issue of some sort, maybe on the electrical side through the hybrid system, which cost him quite a bit of time and quite a bit of power, which meant he was unable to battle with those 2 Ferraris ahead of him. So it was a good solid race. Everybody sort of sat in the right sort of places and got through the weekend pretty unscathed. A couple of big issues. Ocon had a big accident on the Saturday morning ahead of qualifying, and he was surprised. There's a couple of the areas of the track there without Tech Pro barrier, and he actually suffered from a cracked chassis from a 51G impact, which is really on a modern circuit like that shouldn't be happening. I really do think they need to again, and they'll learn from it. Put these Tech Pro barriers in place. I say they'll learn from it. I'm sure that really appeases the Renault and the Alpine engineers that have to rebuild a complete monocoque because it's cracked in 2.
Yeah, that was a heck of a hit he took there. And
Sainz had a
again,
hit as well in exactly the same spot. Yeah, Sainz had a big hit in the same spot, and it wasn't like a huge impact like you saw Mick Schumacher have in Saudi Arabia a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't a massive impact. It was just clumsy in a way. And it was just that instantaneous impact with the wall, and the fact there wasn't any Tech Pro, it was just pure concrete. Certainly was the issue there. So I'm sure they'll change that going forward, but maybe they could have been a little bit smarter and a bit more proactive with doing that. Because these are the things that cause issues these days in Formula One. These unusual accidents and these accidents that aren't predictable. You're looking back at maybe something like Romain Grosjean's accident, in Bahrain a few years ago. It's, you could never predict an impact like that. And they didn't impact, or they didn't predict impacts like Carlos Sainz and Esteban Ocon had there. But, obviously they can, and I'm sure they'll address that going into next year. But, on the whole, I think it was a pretty good race. A couple of little clumsy incidences. I think it was Gasly got some damage in contact with Alonso, and then I don't know if something failed and he hit Norris with a few laps to go, but it was pretty spectacular. Lando Norris was very lucky he didn't hit the wall a lot harder than he did, and walked away from that. Of course, that led to the late safety car, which sort of shuffled the pack and played right into George Russell's hands there. And, he managed to get another really good result, outscored Lewis Hamilton again. Mr. Saturday is turning into Mr. Sunday. He's outperformed his qualifying position every race so far this season, and has been pretty stout in the races.
And I believe he's outperformed his teammate in every race this season.
I thought Hamilton got one podium, didn't he?
He may have.
The first race of the season, I think Hamilton sort of inherited after both Perez and Verstappen retired. But on the whole, I think Russell has been pretty damn impressive this season, and not spectacular but solid. Obviously the glimpses that we saw of him in Mercedes in Bahrain a couple of years ago, we all knew the kid has raw pace, but he just needs to, he's doing it in the smart, methodical way, which I'm so sure is delighting the guys at Mercedes, the way he's going about it. But a lot of credit there. Mick Schumacher and Seb Vettel had a clumsy accident with a couple of laps to go. Mick sort of dived down the inside into turn one, pretty opportunistic move to tell you the truth, and Seb sort of turned in on him and they collided and unfortunately put them both out of the race, which I think that would have resulted in Mick scoring his first points as a Formula One driver, which I think he's deserved. He certainly showed it was staged Magnus, and I think it's pretty fair to say this last weekend, and he's getting there. It's still a learning curve for him. He's not in a particularly good. Last year he was in a very poor car, so you've got to wonder what he's really learned. So in many ways, this is almost would be considered a rookie year for him, and especially with having the new car, there's a lot to learn there. So the fact he's now in a position to fight with other drivers and look at these top 10 positions, I think he'll get points this season, and I think it'll be on as the season goes. And you're certainly seeing in that mid pack, 1 week McLaren's really strong as they were in Imola, and then the next week they're weak, and then Haas can be strong 1 week, and then weaker the following. And there's certainly points up for grabs, as Alex Albon showed. He got a 9th place finish there after Alonso had a couple of penalties, but a really, again, 2 out of 3 weeks or 2 out of 3 races, strong performance there from Albon. Finishing 10th, 11th, and 9th in the last 3 races. So you really, he's stepping up there and has taken that team leader role and is really putting Nicholas Latifi to shame, really. And, there must be concerns about Latifi's long-term future there in the team, despite how much money his family brings into the sport. If they can find other sponsors, then his position, I think, could be in a little bit of jeopardy. But,
certainly, yeah.
No,
another guy with a really good run this weekend was your old friend Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah, and he was 5th, I think, for a long time, and then when the 2 Mercedes were squabbling behind him, he openly admitted that he was watching their battle and lost concentration and clipped the wall, and unfortunately lost those 2 spots. But yeah, Valtteri again, solid. Probably reveling a little bit being outside of Lewis Hamilton's shadow and not having that pressure on him, and being able to drive how he wants to drive in a aggressively and flat out in the way that he wants to. And yeah, certainly living up to expectation there. And you often wonder when guys drop down from a top team into, and no disrespect to Alfa Romeo here, a mid-pack team, how are they going to perform? And you see some guys just drift off into retirement. Then you see other guys like Valtteri who really proved that he's still got it. He's in the right place, and very, very impressive. And long may that continue.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And again, I think that he's of course benefited from the fact that they're associated with Ferrari. Ferrari's got a better car this year, so we see the Haas is a little better than it had been. So was the Alfa. But Valtteri looks better than Kimi has the last couple of years in the Alfa.
Oh, for sure, sure. And it's it's a difficult one because he does have a pretty of an unknown quantity there in Guan Yu Zhou as a teammate. Who knows? I mean, the car may be even quicker than Valtteri's making it out to be. It's a difficult one to quantify. But he's doing what he needs to do, and very, very impressive. I don't think you could ask for any more from him so far this season.
All right, so let's talk about Mercedes a little bit. So here we are, with five, 6 races into the season now.
Yep, 5 races.
We've yet to have a Mercedes win, which is, by their standard, absolutely ridiculous. It's usually
in the hybrid area,
yeah. So, and they're of course, falling behind out of the championship. So, it is a long season. There's obviously development that goes on during the season. I mean, they're not that far off the mark. They've dropped to the third best team.
I mean, and I think on average they're third best, but any given week they're probably fourth best. As I say, there's some week McLaren is up there, other week the Alpines have been pretty competitive, other weeks the Alfa Romeos have been competitive. But yeah, as the average out those first 5 races, yes, I agree with you there, Frank. They're probably the third best team, and there's a fundamental lack of understanding. Is lack of understanding the right word? Issue with that car that they don't fully have a grasp on, and they probably didn't expect from all the simulation and the wind tunnel work and the development work they've done probably over the last 18 months on that car. And you're obviously seeing the issues there. So I firmly believe again that come the middle of the season, the end of the season, they'll be fighting for wins and there or thereabouts come the end of the season, middle of the season, and definitely by the end of the season. But it's certainly interesting to see that dynamic of how the drivers react, how Lewis reacts, how George Russell reacts. But he's probably just glad not to be running last every week. He's glad to be running fifth.
Oh, certainly, yeah. Russell is a happy camper right now. He's got a great car compared to where he's been. But I kind of wonder about the long term future for Lewis then, because here's a guy who doesn't have many records left to break. The only one left is to get that 8th championship, and that is pretty much just about out of reach for this year. I mean, how long does he? How long does he stick around? And obviously, particularly if the car doesn't get much better, through the year, because here's a guy that can walk away and have nothing to be ashamed of. You know what I mean? And here's a guy who last season, left him with a bit of a bitter taste in his mouth the way it all went down at the end of the year. So you got to wonder what his motivation is right now, or what his level of motivation is right now.
Without any hesitation. And I think Lewis is one of those guys, without knowing him personally, but he he gets rattled, I think. The whole, and we still don't know exactly what happened in 2016 with the whole or 2015 it really started, in 2016 with the whole Rosberg dynamic within the team, why team members were moved around in the way they were, and what led to that pretty nasty situation there. And then, of course, Rosberg pulled the ultimate trump card and said, "Oh, by the way, Lewis, I'm off. Bye." It's like retiring as it's like being the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world in boxing and then retiring. Nobody's going to beat you, and you go out on top, and it must just grate with Lewis that. And then, of course, what happened last year with Max was, we talked about this, man. It was difficult. I mean, fundamentally, I think personal opinion is that Max was the better driver throughout the course of last season, probably deserved to win on that level. Whether he deserved to win based on the events of Abu Dhabi, I don't know. But, Lewis will look at that with this sort of frustrated mindset, I think, about, he could easily be a 9-time world champion already. And, he's not. And I don't know where that motivation is going to come from, whether he's motivated to right those wrongs or or they're just going to stew on him. And at the end of the day, if Mercedes can't deliver him a car, which they haven't at the moment, there needs to be a clear understanding and a clear direction as to where they're going to go. Now, he does have a multiple-year contract, I believe. So He does have a contract through to at least the end of 2023. So, mind you, contracts, as we all know, are only even worse the paper they're written on. So, who knows what's going to happen? But he certainly needs that motivation, and he's not getting that at the moment. And then some of the dynamics with the team, especially on the team radio, don't quite sit right. You know, they were like, in the middle of the race, he was asking about strategy, and he's like, and they turn around to him and say, well, what do you think? And he's like, well, that's not my job. You know, do what you know. Obviously, he can provide input to the teams in terms of tire performance and durability and all this sort of stuff. But fundamentally, these teams have highly skilled, highly paid strategy engineers to make that call. And then on the other side of the garage, you see George Russell basically saying, hey, let's stay out, guys, hope for a safety car and see what happens. And they did, and it worked out perfectly for him. So there must be some frustrations going on there within Lewis Hamilton's mindset for sure.
Yeah. Now, Joey, I was going to see if Joey or Louise want to chime in, because Richard and I have been dominating the conversation. I didn't want to forget that you guys are here. But Joey, go ahead.
Yeah. No. So a few things on the Lewis Hamilton front that this is just kind of my own personal opinion. I'm probably wrong, but when you look at the previous era when he was the most dominant, I struggle to give him full credibility for that car. And a lot of that comes because when you look at the time that Schumacher and Rosberg were teammates, a lot of that job that Schumacher and them were doing were to build to that point of the old era of car. And once it was there and once it was on, all you had to do is keep tweaking it, as we saw. Like, you didn't have to do anything radical with it to make the massive advancements year over year. You just had to keep fine tuning it. So Lewis came into pretty much an already assertive situation where he knew he was going to a place that he could just go and win, challenge for championships, win a bunch of championships, be a front runner every week. And I just kind of look at that point, and then I look at this and I'm thinking to myself, there's no Rosberg, there's no Schumacher. So this car's development that he's driving at Mercedes right now is strictly on his feedback, his views, the stuff that he told the engineers. So he's essentially reaping what he sows, in my opinion, when you look at what they're running. Equally, I just don't see the same hunger out of him, the same drive, the same fire. Now, it's still early days, and, you know, we've not really ever known Lewis to come out of the gate swinging, really. I mean, usually it's a Ferrari that, even during the big Mercedes era of wins and championships, it was always a Ferrari or Red Bull that came out of the gate swinging, and Mercedes around race 3, 4, 5, you know, they get to hitting their stride and off they go. But I just look at this current situation, and I just, you've got to be more impressed with where Ferrari's grown and the fact that Red Bull's been able to maintain. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that they've got guys that they knew, let's develop based on what we feel. Leclerc, what are you feeling? Verstappen, what are you feeling? Where do you want to go with this? What do you think about this? You know, what are we looking for from a drivability standpoint? How's the aero engine standpoint? And all those things being in unison. And there is dysfunction at Mercedes. And I think some of that does come down to Lewis. You know, he's the leader of that team. And so I think that the fact that Russell came in there, like you said, he's probably not happy not to be at the back. So this really does, in my opinion, come down to Lewis. And so I don't see the fire. I don't see the drive. Maybe it'll be there, but right now I'm not really impressed with what I'm seeing. Can they win races later this year? Absolutely. But I'd be hard pressed to say that this isn't more than a 2-team race from here on out. As we've seen in the past, that's usually how it goes. I think that you're looking at Mercedes and McLaren as the battle for third in the constructors right now.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there. It is interesting to see that mentality and that drive. You know, you can't be a Formula One driver at these levels that these guys are doing and just go through the motions. And any sport, any professional athlete has to be, you know, 100% committed. I know these, I'm 110. No, nobody's 110%. If you're 110%, it means you weren't trying hard enough before. You're 100% committed to these sort of things. And yeah, it's difficult because you don't see him winning, so you don't see that mentality and that attitude and that persona for him. So
you hear the radio calls and you hear the voice and you hear the concern and you just feel the disconnect, right? Like that
But I
vibe
think
just
you've
kind of.
always had that, though, haven't you? When he hasn't been winning and when somebody's been getting the better of him, he's always been, put it bluntly, bitching to Pete Bonington, his race engineer, on the radio. Oh, this is no good, we're tired of all this sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
that's the thing.
But they work through it. I think fundamentally Lewis is on the radio, and I don't read too much into what happens on the radio with Lewis, because he does have that manner on the radio that is not. It's not really what the engineers want to hear, and I think he, from what I understand, and a lot of drivers are like this. This isn't unique to Lewis. He has a very, very close inner circle of people he works with, and Pete Bonington and James Vowles and guys like that at the Mercedes team are those sort of close confidants and close circle of people he has, and they're basically 50% engineer, 50% babysitter or counselor, and these guys. And I think what you've got to realize is these guys as well are at such a level that they want to be running at 100% all the time. But Formula One these days isn't like that. You can't run at 100% for 70 laps of a Grand Prix and push the cars to the limit. And that annoys and frustrates the drivers, because that's what they're paid to do, basically, and that's what they want to do. So for guys on the radio, their job is to, in some cases, Lewis is a prime example, to coach them through the weekend or through the race, and comfort them and enable them to deliver their maximum performance. And thing with Hamilton and Bono, the hammer time sort of thing, when that's the sort of thing that inspires and gets Hamilton going. And it doesn't really matter these days, when they're running around where they are. You can't do that every lap, and that's what they want to do, because they want to go quick.
I've got to double check this, but you talk about records that Lewis still has to break. I actually don't think he has the fast lap record. I actually think Kimi Räikkönen has that record. I think.
What, most fastest laps?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe so. Last I saw, he had like 49 or something like that. I know Schumacher had a ton too, but Kimi and the McLaren back in like what, 04, 05? I mean, if it wasn't for mechanical failures, I mean, Kimi's probably a 2 or 3 time world champion, and we don't even know who Fernando Alonso is right now.
And I think the problem is that statistic of fastest laps is going to be skewed now, because obviously with there being a point on offer, you often see people coming into the pits to stick on a fresh set of tires just to get that fastest lap, whereas historically they may not have done that. So I think going forward, that statistic is going to be a little bit skewed. It's almost like comparing points, between previous, point system generations, and say, well, if we score everybody in 1960 like we score in 2022, then this would be how many points they have. But of course, drivers drive differently when there's 10th battling for a point compared to 10th battling not to drive off the edge of a cliff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you adjust your game to the rules.
Yeah.
So if there's a point on the line, you're gonna go for it. If
So
not,
that Facebook group where they say, "Oh, this would be the NASCAR standings if we applied Formula One points and vice versa." It's like, it's stupid, because the drivers would drive completely differently.
That reminds me of this one Facebook group that does like the Formula One standings on ARC. As like, I know it's for jokes and giggles at the end of the day, but who cares, really?
Yeah.
In that sense,
I know what I know what you mean, Joe, in terms of what drives him, what motivates him. Is he there to check off the boxes when it comes to results and championships and records, or is he there? I think the most successful guys and the most dominant guys are the ones that don't look at that. They're the ones that look at the individual instances, and they want to be they want to win a race. And then
go ahead.
If they concentrate on the races, then the championships will take care of themselves. And I think that's where the best drivers come. I don't think they look at, obviously, certain situations, they'll look at the bigger picture when it comes to, how many points they need. And, Alan Prost was the prime example of that. But, I think that some of the guys They just look purely at, week to week and performance to performance and lap to lap almost. And that's what motivates them. And I think that's where the true greats sort of rise up.
Yeah, I just have an overgrowing sense of just seeing the picture with him, the body language, the radio calls, and all the things that kind of engulf what's going on with that situation right now. And there's just a sense of complacency and being content. And, that's not going to win you another championship right now.
No, it's almost, but it's difficult though. I mean, what he's probably sat there thinking, well, what more can he do? And it is difficult for a driver when you've been in that position, I'm sure, where you are dominating for, the good part of nearly 10 years in total through that hybrid era, to suddenly being in a situation where you're doing your job, you're driving as well as you ever have, but you're not getting results purely because of external issues. That must be very, very hard to be motivated. And because, the development cycles of these cars and the fundamental understanding of where they need to improve that Mercedes is probably limited. It must be very, very difficult to get back to that place and to have that, mentality.
Humbling.
Yeah, exactly. See, if you think about it, like Russell is, happy as can be to be running in fourth or fifth, or or maybe with a shot at a podium. To Lewis, that's he's usually running first or second. I mean, golly,
I think if Mercedes
he's got 100 and some wins.
If Mercedes had a car capable of winning races, I think you'd see Hamilton being a lot more competitive to Russell and maybe even outperforming him. I think it's that mentality, though, more than anything.
The updates moving forward are going to be interesting to see how that progresses, since his input's going to help provide direction for those updates. I'm really curious where this progresses as the season goes on, for sure.
And it's going to be interesting as well, because these are, these cars are so different. What input are they providing? It's not like historical input on the way these cars work. Are they able to, is he able to provide that feedback on these ground effect cars? Who knows?
Time will tell. Now, Louise, you've been quiet over there. Yeah. So that's usually Richard's phrase. But what are your some of thoughts on Miami? I know you had a chance to watch it. And,
I wish I could give you genuine thoughts about the race, but I feel like the race was on social media and the bickerness and bitterness that is out there. No surprise, but boy, it grew horrendously bad to the point that I just wanted no part of it. To me, I'm a guy that's like, if this is an attempt to grow F1 in America with the viewership of 2 million, they're winning the demo over NASCAR by a good amount, by a good 100,000 plus, well more than 100,000. Let them have their fruitful nature. I understand why IndyCar fans are upset. I understand why NASCAR fans are upset. For me, it's like, I just want to enjoy good, wholesome racing as best I can. See if the Miami circuit produces a great product. Did it? Not necessarily, to the point that some people felt like this was easily one of the worst races of the season so far. We'll see how Catalonia goes in a couple of weeks, because that's next. But yes, it was all about spectacle, which it is what it is. You want to get large people, but then I heard rumblings there's some potential companies that might be interested may not come back because you have that first race jitters to how it's or how organized, how flawed it is as far as organizational and structural standpoints. We saw that in Nashville, probably saw that in Coda when F1 came along in 2012. It's literally nothing new, but the fact that you have all I heard is just the prices. Yeah, that's beating on a dead horse at this point. And then, you should know X, Y, and Z before you go onto the grid, or X, Y, Z. You should know. It's like, if they don't know the sport, or they don't know who it is, or they make an honest, simple mistake, like Martin Brundle confusing Patrick Mahomes with a Duke basketball player that's Italian that also so happened to be in Seattle. And no, I will not talk about the Seahawks nor the Mariners in this program. Let's carry on with that. It's just like, for me, I just want to enjoy the race. The fact that people were talking about what qualifies you as a reporter, what qualifies you as an expert. It's just pathetic and sad. There's so many things people should be worrying about than just stuff that's out of your control. Worry about your
exactly.
role.
People worried about who's considered a celebrity. You know what I mean? It's like so
worry
what?
About
so what? This guy's in the race.
Worry about getting your facts right, like Team Penske's first win of the season, quote unquote, which is not.
And then there were some people that were not thrilled that it was Danica Patrick doing the post qualifying interviews. You know,
nor Willie T. Reds doing the post race for that matter.
I mean, you know, Willie T. Ribs was hired by the Grand Prix as one of their ambassadors. So was Danica. You know what I mean? And both those folks, in my mind, are, you know, they're both very important people in racing for a couple of different reasons. But yeah, see, Louise, your problem is you followed it too much on Twitter because you know people just like to bitch, and then they like to.
No, we know.
Yeah,
and the youngest of the panel here.
Yeah, but you know, they just like to get their thought known to say, "Oh, I didn't find this palatable because I want you to think that I'm smarter than you," or you know. So I mean, whatever. But yeah, but to your point, yeah, I just want to see the race.
Yeah, exactly. At the end, was it great? No, but will it move the needle to increasing audience in America? Well, time will tell, and we'll see with next year with Miami, and also when Vegas comes along, because that also is going to be the big thing. But
yeah, if you thought Miami was a spectacle, wait till we get to Vegas.
Because more so that is towards the very end of the year. It's obviously not the finale because Abu Dhabi is locked up to, I think, 2030. I think that's the finale. So we'll see how that goes. But that's just my 2 cents on the whole ordeal, the takeaway of the Grand Prix. And as far as Verstappen, I think, yeah, people saw a battle for the lead, even if it was very brief with Charles and Max early in the going. So we'll see how they improve on the Grand Prix, and hopefully they get around some of the kinks. But some people said that the race wasn't all that great, that it may rival Sochi and maybe worse than Sochi. But we'll see how the second year comes along.
Yeah, well, the good news, yeah, but the good news though is the promoters seem to be very open to any feedback on what changes can be made to the course, and so they're willing to do just about whatever Formula One recommends. And to Richard's point, it's not really hard to change it since it's a temporary circuit in the parking lot. They can make a couple of tweaks to some of the turns there, get a couple of different barriers in there, and just really listen to what's being presented to them by the drivers and the sanctioning body. And because these guys, they've got a lot on the line, they've invested a lot in this thing, and they want this thing to continue. They don't want to be a one and done or 3 years,
or end up like Valencia, to where they have this interesting circuit, now it looks like a dump.
It's a parking lot for used car or new cars, isn't it, that come off the ports in Valencia? I mean, I don't think it was that bad a race. I really don't understand all the criticism of it. I think people are just criticizing it because it's a cheap shot. Fundamentally, it was a pretty good race.
It could well be, but then again, like with Imola, I enjoyed, despite all the uproar about DRS. Like, we actually got to see how they were run without it, like in its natural ability of the car.
Yeah, but I mean, again, people are a personal opinion here. I think people are being, overly critical here. And
yeah,
you take a race what it is, and the competition that it is, and the contest that it is, and the drivers can only drive the track you give them. And fundamentally, it's a half decent track with some, reasonable, overtaking opportunities. I mean, you don't want this to be like a super speedway race where you get a lead change every 5 minutes. You want the best guys to be out front. You want the best guys to, in the best equipment and the best prepared teams to be successful. And I think that's what you're getting. I don't have an issue with the race results. I thought it was pretty good.
No,
I thought it was pretty good too. Yeah, but like I say, in context, as a Formula One race, right? If you grew up watching plate racing from Talladega, this may not be your cup of tea. That's where you get a lot of these people that say, "Oh, Formula One is boring." Well, it's boring because you're not really paying attention to the nuances. And even, even to an extent, IndyCar fans that say we need more ovals because all the road course races are boring. Well, they're not. I don't find them boring. But then again,
No, I don't.
I
either.
just see, I grew up watching road racing, and I understand the strategies and the nuances. And if a guy dominates a race and pulls out a 5-second lead, I appreciate that. I appreciate that performance, and watching something truly grand. But again, not everybody likes the same thing. So, but I feel like overall, despite what the naysayers on Twitter are saying, I feel like the race was, rather well received.
Yeah. I mean, the viewing figures were good, which is the aim of the game, really, in many, many ways. Yeah, it's one of the hard things, isn't it, that all motorsport has, is to highlight the skills of these drivers. It's not like a hockey player or a basketball player or a soccer player, you can see the skills that these players possess firsthand. And 90% of us out there have all tried to play these sports and probably fallen flat on our asses and made a complete idiot of ourselves. So we appreciate the skills involved in some of those, bat and ball sports and the like. But none of us have ever tried to drive a car at 220 miles an hour, 3 inches from a wall, and then stop it to 50 miles an hour and under 100 meters. And, we all turn around and say, well, that was boring, because we don't have a reference point in our own mind. It's very difficult.
Absolutely. All right. So we're off to, we got a week off from Formula One, right? Well, we pack up and head back to Europe.
Yep.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. We're back in Barcelona. People complain that Milan was a boring race. Wait for Barcelona.
Wait for Barcelona. Yeah.
We don't know yet. We'll see what it's the ultimate test for the car by their standards. We'll see what they produce, and maybe we'll see. But at the end of the day, it was it a success in terms of viewership and all across the world. Aside from eliminate the racing quality itself, but was it a success? Yes, I say it was a success. They got some polishing to do, like maybe add some marina this next year. That's asking a lot.
Some real water. Well, I was afraid a car was going to end up in the harbor. So, but the real test is because they sold this thing out before it ever happened. This year, the real test is going to be a year from now. See how many fans come back for a second go. See if they sell it out again.
Yeah, that's going to be the ultimate test. There's some rumblings that some may not be back, especially companies, because of how some stuff were run. Like apparently the Paddock Club that's not the same people that they run in Europe. It's completely different folks. So they're not. So to some that have been to those Paddock Clubs, I have no idea because I don't have the budget of Carlos Slim to do it. If I did, I tell you by experience, but we'll see. Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting mystery how that goes next year. But all it was a success. I just kind of was just fed up with social media at the end of this weekend more than ever, just because of the whole just unwarranted drama. It's unwarranted.
Exactly. Everybody wants to, Formula One is experiencing some success in America and a resurgence in America. Well, I don't want to say a resurgence, maybe just a surgence, because it's always been kind of a little bit off the radar in the U.S. Say for like in about 78 when Mario was winning the championship. But even then, Formula One was small potatoes compared to the empire it is now. But yeah, so people are just, I think there's some jealousy.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody said it best. Yeah. That's what it is, in my opinion. It's just like outright bitterness to the point that we're just complaining about the grid walk, which is nothing new. It's like, was it awkward? Yes. Do we expect Bruno to know some of these celebrities? No. Because he's a racing pundit, as they call it.
Yeah, he doesn't know Megan Thee Stallion.
Or
she's the one from what was that in
That was Coda.
And Coda, yeah, that she made a big deal about,
Yeah, it's like
you don't know me or whatever. Yeah, but so what? Martin Brundle doesn't listen to top 40 music, I'm sure.
The fact that he knows who by name Patrick Mahomes just kind of shows you that outside of Tom Brady, that Patrick Mahomes was known outside of the States, which not many NFL players can claim that at the moment.
No, absolutely not. So, all right. So let's move on. Let's talk about NASCAR for a bit. NASCAR was in Darlington for the throwback weekend, the weekend they used to be on Labor Day. Now it's on Mother's Day. And again, NASCAR breaking all their rules. They raced on Easter. Now they've raced on Mother's Day.
They typically run on sometimes on Mother's Day. Yeah.
Well, a lot of times on a Saturday.
True, when it used to run like the Southern 500 that is today, when they switched it from fall to the spring, when it was like the Dodge Avenger 500 for the first few years after the move, and also the Winston at Atlanta of '86. Then nobody showed up. Then they went back to Charlotte up until the pandemic led to so on and so forth. And now we're in Texas, where the
okay, all right, man, you just made my head hurt. But anyway, so Joey Logano won the race, kind of pushed his way into the win. Now, Joey Barnes, I know you've got some thoughts on this since your namesake there won the race. And we had talked about it a little bit, off the air before we started. But, let me have you chime in on your thoughts. Yet another NASCAR race ending with a guy dumping another one for the win.
Do you want the good version of Joey Barnes, or do you want the honest version of Joey Barnes?
I prefer the honest version, Joey.
Okay. I thought it was a bullshit move. And just to be honest, you're coming to the white flag. You're already on his bumper. There's no need to make a move like that. And if you're going to make it, you could have made it on the last lap. Instead, you put him in a position to not only lose second, but you end up, where do you end up finishing? Third, fourth, something like that. So you cost him more than what you needed to cost him too. And I looked at it as unnecessary, and it's a continuation. It's a theme. And just from my eyes, I don't necessarily disagree with Byron entirely with some of the words he used about the way he's winning is just by driving through people. I know that we're supposed to be unbiased and all that, but we're also supposed to be analysts too, and just kind of like look at what we see and observe. And frankly, right now, that was a move that felt like desperation. It felt like desperation because, frankly, he hasn't been running up front consistently every week. And this was an opportunity that he wanted to seize, so he's going to do it. And he doesn't care if he has to dump someone in the process. And I get that. Like, look, I'm an IndyCar guy, right? Like, we don't typically race like that in our side, and we don't have fenders and all that stuff. But there's still a level of how you're supposed to respect somebody with how you race them. There wasn't really a whole lot of warning. There wasn't, bumping to signal, hey, I'm here. There was just a straight up dump. And to me, that's a bullshit move. And frankly, I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but man, if I'm in Byron's shoes, you better have a whole lot of people holding me back, because I promise you, he wouldn't be able to walk back to victory lane after doing the whole celebration at the start finish line. So I'd be pretty heated, and I'm just kind of shocked that all he had to do was talk about it. If that's the only criticism I have about people nowadays, that when they get dumped or when they're upset with how somebody raced them. I get that a bunch of sponsors in this, and I get that they're trying to be careful with certain things, but you know what? At some point, you got to throw caution to the wind and actually show somebody how you feel. You can't just shove somebody, whine about it, and turn away. Like, you got to go literally show someone how you feel. And in that sense, I'm kind of shocked that Byron didn't, because I certainly probably would have.
Yeah, so now what I wonder, because we're seeing more and more of these guys just drive through somebody in the last lap for a win. We've seen it a couple times this year, but I mean, is that a byproduct of the playoff format where you win and you're in? So if you're on the outside looking in the points here, right? And but you've got a shot. Hey man, if I win this thing, if I win this thing today, I don't have to fool that until we get down to the last 10 races of the year, and to get that off my plate and out of the way, and I'll know that I'm in. So I wonder if that has more guys just being just a little more aggressive to because if you're running for points, right, back in the day, like we did before the playoffs, you'd be smarter to hold off for a second place points than to risk, spinning yourself by pushing the guy out of the way. I mean, just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I get that. And maybe there is some truth to that being a byproduct of the formats creating this kind of necessity style of racing that these drivers feel. And maybe that's part of it. It's probably a good amount of it, actually. But and certainly NASCAR is getting what they want, right? Like now you can milk this radio segment thing and all these post-race scenes for the next 3 or 4 days until we get to Kansas, because Lord knows you're not going to get a whole lot out of Kansas. So, you just, when you look at Bristol, that was expected because it's Bristol, right? And you come to Darlington, it's pretty narrow. You're going to have to probably do something to get around somebody, and it might be a nudge. I just don't think you do it on the second to last lap. I think if you want to do that on the last lap, final corner, because you're on there or coming out of 2, I understand it on the last lap. I don't understand it on the second to last lap, especially when you already had the pace and Byron was already out of shape. Like, it was evident. You look at the in-car footage of that, and it's obvious. And that's part of the reason why I think that part, why I keep calling it a bullshit move. But when you look at this championship format, you've got to be more aggressive. But equally, you could argue that, compare this era of driver to the era of, back in the day. How do I say this without being a total dick?
We could just call you that. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, look, when you look at the way that a lot of people have been come up, there was a little bit more of a blue collar mentality back in the day, a different economic class where you literally had to shove your way to get opportunities. And I don't necessarily think that when you look at a field of drivers right now, and the Cup Series in particular, a lot of them are paid drivers. Like, those sponsors, they're able to find the money and they're able to do things, so that ride's assured. And they're not having to work their way up to get the eye of a team owner to put them in a seat because they've got the sponsor, because they've got everything. And it's just a matter of trying to push that way to the right opportunity. Guys nowadays are racing like they're in a video game. And, there's not really a whole lot of second thought for what you do to somebody. And frankly, Harvick touched on that in the past with how people race nowadays. And I think that's pretty true. I think he mentioned something like that on the Dale Jr. download. So,
Joe, quick question for you. And this revolves around all motorsport series, not just Cup racing.
Okay.
But do you think it's because and I think we've mentioned this on the show before, as the safety levels have improved in the sport, some of these younger drivers don't necessarily understand or appreciate the risks that they're involved in because they've never seen the tragedies that we've seen with, the Dan Weldon sort of accidents and the Justin Wilson accidents and the Dale Earnhardt accidents and the Senna style accidents. People are becoming immune to the dangers. And as you say, the video game generation, in a video game, you pile into as many people as you possibly can. I just wonder, if that's playing into it at all.
I mean, you play chicken with the train enough, at some point the train.
Oh, exactly.
Right?
Oh, no, for sure. It's going to happen. But I wonder if that sort of, mentality is coming into play. These kids growing up through the feeder series haven't, to put it bluntly, have had the bell rung often enough to realize what danger they can do.
Absolutely. Richard, I agree with you 100% that you've got a whole generation of drivers that are desensitized to the fact that somebody could die out there, right? Because it's been a long time since somebody has actually died out there. But
I say it's a generational thing, and also attention span is not as great as it once was. And I think I think that was one of the things I mentioned in a piece after the 2018 Daytona 500 in a column, to where I feel like it's a generational thing because you didn't see guys like Jared Labonte and those guys do dumb stuff like that. They were more of a methodical approach. Ride in the back, and then when it's ready, and if the car is good enough and they're not wrecked, go for it.
Here's the crazy thing to me, though. This era of driver, the majority of this field, I say majority lightly. I mean, maybe half the field. They've seen Austin Dillon end up in the fence and scattered all over. They've seen Eric Almirola end up breaking his back at Kansas a few years back. Y'all remember? Like, so it's not like there hasn't been extreme incidents where you look at that and happened? Go, Ryan Newman situation, right? Like that's existed in this generation, but it's still caution.
Right, but all those guys have walked away.
Yeah, they're like, you know, and I don't want to, you know, got to be careful what I say, but remember when Austin Dillon had his accident. I mean, I remember it. I was working with him at the time, and it was at like 1 o'clock in the morning or something, wasn't it? It was very late at night. It was the summer Daytona race, wasn't it?
I thought it was it going into 3 or 4 in the morning. I don't know.
It was getting pretty late. I remember that.
It was rather late. Yeah.
You know, he gets out the car and he's making all these, like, not being disrespectful, stupid hand gestures, you know, and it's like, come on, dude, you know, you could have been killed here, and, you know, show some, like, I don't know.
Humility.
To me, it was a strange sort of, you know, and you know, you saw it with Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen at Silverstone last year. I mean, we all knew Max was okay fundamentally, and he went to hospital for checkups, which, you know, is pretty routine under the circumstances. But there's no sort of, and I'm sure there is off-screen, you know, concern for your competitor, but, you know, it didn't come across that way. And I thought Lewis could, you know, being the senior driver that he is, could have, you know, done something a little bit more there.
Yeah, could have checked on Max. Yeah. So anyway, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but we've got a couple other topics I want to touch on. And one of those being that we did get the 33rd entry for the Indy 500, and that'll be Stefan Wilson. So we've got 33. Probably won't get to 34. You know, I've got a little intel on the Top Gun situation, and the way that whole thing, as it stands right now, is that car, they have one fully assembled car and one car in pieces, has been returned to the Enersons, who's the original owners of it. So RC Enerson and, you know, along with his dad Neil, intend to run a couple of road courses later in the year, just like Peretta Motorsports. But Top Gun is also saying that they're looking at running a couple of races later in the season, you know, with a driver to be named with a car they're going to get from somebody. And that car likely may come from Carlin, you know, or the Carlin / Juncos. The Juncos is sitting on a couple of extra chassis after the 500. So they're talking like they still want to get in the game. So we'll have to see how that plays out. The pace car driver for the 500 will be Sarah Fisher, which I'm quite pleased with that choice. You know, a lot of times they'll have a celebrity or a older driver, you know, come back. And, you know, they've had Jeff Gordon in the past and Dario, and they've had Roger Penske and, you know, Donald Trump drive the pace car. But we've got Sarah Fisher, which I believe is a great choice. You know, I have a lot of respect for Sarah, what she's done. And then we are off.
Isn't she the female with the most Indy 500 starts? Did I read?
9. Yep.
Yeah, Danica's got to be right up there, though. Danica, she's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, Danica's probably got 7. So, yeah, she's got the most Indy 500 starts. She's also the woman who's posted the fastest qualifying speed at Indianapolis as well.
That was it, yeah.
Yep. So that's another one of her stats. But I mean, if you ever had a chance to meet Sarah or just talk to her, she is just a wonderful person. She really is. She's got a great personality. She's very outgoing. She's very intelligent, very focused, and I'm really pleased that they're giving her this honor of being the pace car driver. Although she has, you know, driven the pace car at the 500 numerous times, you know, during the race, but she'll be the celebrity pace car driver for the opening laps. And I think then after that, it'll go to, I believe Oriol Servia is the guy that does it this day and age. So, and then we are off to the GMR Grand Prix of Indianapolis. So we've got just a couple of minutes. We can make a pick for the Indy Grand Prix, and we can make a pick for Kansas. If we'll just go around the table here, I'll start with you, Louise.
Let's see. For Kansas, let's go with Alex Bowman. And as far as the GMR Grand Prix, Will
All right. And Richard?
For Indianapolis, let's go with Roman Grosjean.
Roman Grosjean. Yeah, he did really well there last year. So, and
yeah, he did, didn't he?
Yeah, Joey?
Indy GP. I mean, since Power's already off the table, I actually like Jack Harvey. I think this is a good opportunity for him to go to his favorite track that he runs well at and do something special there with Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan, maybe, and get his first win.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, Harvey's done well there too. And with that being said, another guy who's done well there, and it's also his favorite track, Rinus VeeKay. I'm going to go with him. And then for Kansas, I'll go with, I don't know.
You going to pick Logano?
No, I was thinking more along the lines of Kyle Larson.
It's a good pick.
Yeah.
I didn't make it.
Let's go on a limb there.
Well, Joey, who you like for Kansas?
Let's go Kyle Busch. He just had a kid. He ain't going to be able to miss the race. I think he's going to have himself a good end of the week.
Yeah, it's got to be better than last week where he just left his car in the middle of pit lane and strolled off from it. Yeah, we didn't talk about that, but yeah, that was a.
No, we really did talk about the race, how and Ross Chastain looked like he had a shot of winning, and then he had another turn 2 sad episode like he did in Xfinity in 18.
Yeah. All right. So, well, we are out of time. So I want to thank Dan Blay Racing Artwork for being our sponsor. Find them on Facebook. Get your IndyCar custom diecast made of whatever driver you'd like that you can't find in the store. Also want to thank Mark Dill and Legend of the First Super Speedway. FirstSuperspeedway.com is where you'll find them. I want to thank Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. And I want to thank you, Joey, Louise, and Richard. And I want to thank you folks that listen to us week in and week out. But now we are into the month of May. We are getting ready for the Indy 500, Monaco Grand Prix coming up. The Charlotte race. They still call it the Coca-Cola 600.
Yep, it's still been the Coke 600 for pushing 35 or so years now.
All right, so we haven't changed that yet. So anyway, but until next week, everybody, good night.
Who?